Welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO here at NextGen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, thank you to our two fantastic sponsors for continuing to sponsor this podcast. MSD Animal Health is perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia and for their Allflex range across the world, with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Honiger is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Honiger team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. G'day Head Shepherd listeners, Ferg here, bringing you a bonus episode. This one actually is from the Fibre Frontier podcast that we run on behalf of AgriFutures Australia. It's part of a project that we're running to help expand the goat fibre industries across Australia. We see some great complementarity between cattle and sheep production and goat fibre production, a lot of the same infrastructure required, and it's a project we're working on behalf of AgriFutures Australia. We thought you might enjoy some of the content we've been putting together over there at the Fibre Frontier, and so thought we'd put them here within this feed so you could have a listen if you so choose. I hope you enjoy them, and we'll be back to you soon with another Head Shepherd episode. Welcome back to the Fibre Frontier. This week it's our pleasure to have Dr Susan Robertson joining us. Susan's a senior lecturer in ruminant production at Charles Sturt University near Wagga, but we're talking to Susan from the perspective of the goat herd that she started a couple of years ago. So she's sort of 2 years into mohair production, starting with 100 does with an aim of getting up to 200 does. We thought it was an excellent opportunity to talk to Susan about the transition that she's made, runs the Angoras in conjunction with around 1,500 Merinos and in conjunction with a mixed cereal cropping production system as well. So pretty typical of where Angoras are well suited into that mixed system. So yeah, a really good chat to talk through with Susan some of the things that she's had to modify or not modify as she's moved some of her DSE, her dry sheep equivalents, into goats. And well, I'm sure listeners out there are going to really find it interesting to hear Susan's perspective. Welcome, Dr. Susan Robertson, to the show. Welcome, Susan.
Great, thank you.
Susan's a senior lecturer in ruminant production there at Charles Sturt University in Wagga. But in addition to that, we want to talk about her running goats in her private life as well. So how long maybe talk us through first about your Angoras at home, and then we'll get into some of the more detailed and back into work, and we'll sort of vary between work and home a bit, I think. But
yeah, okay. Well, I guess I've had Angora goats at home now for 2 years. So how did I come to make that decision to go into Angoras? Well, I mean, my key interest is obviously merino sheep. Been interested in sheep all my life. Had a couple of pet Angora goats when I was young. And then a couple of years ago, I had a student who had a flock of Angoras, and we did a bit of research on them regarding mohair production. That sort of sparked my interest again, I suppose, and then I found out they were more profitable than sheep in the long term. So that was also a little incentive. So I did a little bit of research about them, and then took the jump in and bought a small flock. Yeah.
So we excellent. We're gonna. I keep calling them flocks, but they're herds. But anyway.
Yes, so do I. Yes, sheep background.
Yeah. And I started. I don't know what, but it's hard to get. Even though I started my first things I had were goats, but I still kept talking flocks. But anyway, that's all good. So, what numbers are you up to now?
So this year I'll probably join about 120 does. But yeah, I'm sort of aiming to get up to, a couple of hundred does, basically because that'll be a more efficient system. If I got a couple of hundred does, I should get a couple of 100 or so female kids per year, and that warrants buying a buck each year. It's inefficient if you don't have enough does to join to a buck. Yeah.
And so your land holding, you'll run sheep as well, or that will be all of the livestock if that get up to that number?
Yeah, so we run, on average, I suppose, about 1,500 merino ewes as well.
Right. And
so the Angora sort of fit fairly easily into that because we've got all the facilities, shearing shed and paddocks and whatever, and the management is very similar. So, it's just another, well, for me it's a hobby, but it's, just a little diversification that, other people could do if they were so wished. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I guess maybe talk about fitting it into that merino production system. So obviously the shearing shed's the same, the yards are the same. Have you had to make any modifications to what you had?
Well, we did purchase some new shearing stands, so shearing machines, because with goats you do need to slow the machine down because they have low grease content in the wool, so in the mohair compared with sheep. So machine gets hot if you don't run it slower. But we needed new ones anyway because ours were very old, so that wasn't done specifically for the goats. Other than that, no, they use the same paddocks, the same sheep yards. You do need a dog. I don't know about anyone else's, but my goats are quite friendly. And certainly, if you have a couple of potties, they are different to move than sheep.
Yeah.
In some ways, a lot easier to move than sheep because they don't panic like sheep. At least mine don't, and they can also be led in if you have the potties there. You know, they'll just follow you.
Yeah.
So the mustering is a little bit different. But certainly, if you didn't have a sheepdog, they would be difficult to get in unless they were all pets and just followed you. Yeah. But other than that, fencings or hinge joint, same as for a sheep. Them getting out is not any more problematic really than for some sheep breeds. You do have to watch, holes in fences or under fences. So they will escape, but, so do crossbred lambs. So I don't know that they're that much worse, although certainly, they are known to climb up strainer posts if you had, strainer posts on a fence, but I haven't had that issue. So fencing's no more an issue it is than, with sheep.
Yeah. Excellent. And so just back on the shearing plants, that was just go back to an Evo that you can switch between sheep speed and goat speed.
So the sort of new ones are Evo brand, and there's 3 speeds. So sheep go on the fastest speed. Yeah. And there's a little band. So you take the top off, and there's a little band that drives the thing, and you just change the drive that it goes on to a smaller wheel, and that makes it slower. Yeah. So it's fairly easy to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you say, if you haven't got Evos in your shed, most shearers will turn up with an Evo because they don't want to shear with the old gear anyway. So it's an upgrade that most people are having to make a bit.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, upgrading shearing sheds is expensive, I suppose. But I guess that's the other point is that getting shearers is probably the biggest issue with goats and sheep actually. But there's less shearers that want to shear goats, and that's mainly, I think, because they haven't had the experience with goats, because there's not many about. Yep. So, getting shearers is something you should line up before you decide to go into goats. Yep. And they do charge more than they do for sheep as well. But, if you only got a few, you can shear them yourself, I suppose. They're not hard to shear. They're not very big. They don't have wrinkle like sheep. Yep. But, if you've got a commercial number, you need shearers.
Yep. Yeah. So if we do go into the, differences in management, fairly similar. I don't know what you've found, but when I've run them together, the goats tend to avoid legging, which leaves it more for the sheep. But I don't know, it's just where they graze. But certainly when I had them down south, they were certainly favouring grasses and other stuff, which was kind of handy in a rotation. But I guess physiological differences that you would know about or talk about through your lecturing and stuff. What are the key differences between goats and sheep?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of points that you really need to be aware of. So goats are really warm climate type animal. So goats are far more sensitive to hypothermia, so cold, than sheep. So, depending on what environment you're in, certainly, some sort of shelter needs to be provided. So I just have them running around my sheds, outside my sheds, off shears. So 6 weeks off shears, they'll be quite sensitive to cold, depending on what time of year you shear, and also kidding, some protection for the kids is really important in terms of getting that kid survival up to a reasonable sort of level. So hypothermia, yes, is something that certainly needs to be considered, and certainly that will vary a bit depending on what your location is. But, I know people certainly at Canberra have goats, so, that's far, far more colder than here. So as long as you've got adequate shelter, that's manageable.
Yeah. Yeah, and they do seek shelter a bit better than
absolutely.
Your average merino as well. So.
Yes, sheep don't tend to seek shelter, whereas the goats, I find that during cold weather they'll sort of be lining up at the gate to come into around the sheds. They're quite different.
Yeah, so it does make providing it a bit easier because they will, if you put it somewhere, they'll find it, kind of thing. Which is
yes, absolutely.
As we've learnt the hard way in sheep, that's not often the case. You can put shelter unless you lock them on the shelter, they'll find some other cold place to be.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess in that pathway, so did you start with a handful and then sort of slowly build numbers? Or
no, I was fortunate enough to find. I hadn't intended on buying so many, but I was fortunate enough in buying about 100 does to start with.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, finding large quantities of goats, I think, is probably still a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
And obviously, people probably need to because they don't seem to have the the stock agent network that the sheep do.
Yeah.
So contact Australian Mohair Marketing Organisation, Mohair Australia, etc. There's they'd know who have goats for sale.
Yeah.
But they're not sort of widely advertised, I find, as yet.
Yeah.
Which is difficult when you don't know people in the industry. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's what we're trying to do with the Gateway as well, is to try and have that opportunity so that anyone can come in and get connected to people and then find those available animals. And because there's obviously they're around, they're just not as visible as they could be. So that's the opportunity. Other differences that you've found or that you know of? Yeah,
so certainly the other thing to be aware of is that goats are more susceptible to worms than sheep. They don't develop the resilience that sheep do. And also there's, not many products registered for, worm control or any other things in goats. So worm control is certainly something people need to be aware of. So use non-drench, management as well. So, keep them on, don't graze short pastures, rotate paddocks to try and control worm burdens, because we really don't want to be relying on drenches because that will build up resistance more quickly. And that's something we need to avoid. But also culling of goats that are more sensitive to or more susceptible to worms, that will remove the sort of tail end that are more likely to be a problem. So worms is a key thing to be aware of. I guess in my first year I lost a couple of does to photosensitization when grazing oats, which surprised me. But I mean, that happens with sheep as well. I just had a bad first year, I think. But sheep grazing all sorts of pastures will develop, photosensitization, and so will goats. That's the message, I suppose. Yeah. No, fair enough. The other thing that people should be aware of is polioencephalomalacia. So I think there's vitamin B1 deficiency. So sudden changes in feed, things like that can sort of prompt that. So just be aware of behaviour of the animals. Just keep an eye on them, and you can see it. And those animals will need a vitamin B1 injection basically. But that's something that doesn't happen much in sheep. No. So it is miraculous when you jab them, though. That's probably the quickest response to a treatment that you'll ever see in your life. Yeah, as long as you get them early enough. Yeah. I guess the other thing with the goats is there is, I think, a greater need for monitoring than with sheep. One of the things that I found is, the horns, they stick their head through a fence and then get stuck. It happens occasionally, not that often. But certainly a bit more frequent checking than with sheep will save those ones. Yeah. You started off with the economics. How did you sort of come to the conclusion that there's more money or potentially more money in goats? There's an analysis that, remains to be tested, I suppose, but but there's an analysis in the scientific literature, gross margin analysis of various comparing sheep and Angora properties over time that, show that over the long term it is more profitable. So, that's obviously going to depend on sheep and goat meat prices and mohair wool prices and how many issues you have, what sort of lambing and kidding percentages you can get. Yeah. But at the moment, mohair is worth a lot of money. So kid mohair at the last sale, I think the top line was worth $49 a kilo. Whereas if you're looking at your 19 micron sort of merino wool, that's been worth about $14 a kilo. Yeah. So we wouldn't I don't expect those mohair prices to stay at that level, but even long term, mohair prices have always been higher than for wool. Yeah. So as long as your goats are producing sufficient of it and your costs aren't too high, that means it will probably be more profitable. Yeah. What's the age structure you're planning on running? You'll sort of run them out to 6 and 7 or something once you're up to steady state? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the moment I've got some older does than that because I'm trying to build up my numbers. But certainly, once you get to, more than 6 or 7 sort of years of age, the mohair production of those does is declining. So broader micron and and lower quantity, and you're going to get more health issues with older animals. So you don't want really old animals in your flock herd, if you can avoid it. And also something that I have found, and I've just written a paper on it, I posted a paper on it, that the other issues in goats, do increase. Well, they're there, and they cause, kid losses. So obviously culling of does as they develop other issues is something that we should all be doing routinely, I suppose, unless you want to potty goats, but that's not cost effective.
No. So bottle teats or just sort of mastitis and stuff, or what?
No. Well, mine had bottle teats basically.
Yeah. And that tends to be as they get older.
Well, the marketing is also something that people should be aware of. So mohair basically gets sold through Narendra, Australian Mohair Marketing Organisation. So there are, unless you're going to market it yourself to buyers, and particularly South Africa. So there are costs associated with transporting mohair, depending on where you are. I'm close to there, so that's fine for me.
Yeah.
But some people may not be, and so that's an additional cost. And there's only a couple of sales per year if that's the way you're selling mohair. So that can be a disincentive for some. The major problem, in my view, is where do you sell castor age or wether goats to? So there's a limited number of abattoirs at the moment who will process goats. So in New South Wales, as far as I'm aware, and I may not know all of them, Wodonga, or Albury Wodonga, and Cowra are the abattoirs that process goats. So a greater number of processors would be useful to increase this industry. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the things that happens when if you get industry growth and you get other players coming in, and that's obviously the aim of this, or the Agri-Futures project, is to expand the industry so that we can have more players and therefore more competition, but just more options really closer to home, and reduce freight and all that sort of stuff. And I guess we have come through a time when goat meat was crazy money, and now it's back to crazy the other way.
Yes, it is most unfortunate, isn't it? Lamb prices were, $10 a kilo as well, and came back to really low levels. And mutton is, currently still $2.50 a kilo.
Yeah.
Roughly. So, unfortunately, goat meat hasn't increased in price yet. But I would expect it would. Goat meat is, something that is, a very commonly eaten or consumed meat overseas.
Yeah.
And there's ample opportunity to increase the market, I think, in Australia. Although, some differentiation of products, so, from bucks to kid, or younger goat would be desirable, probably, I think, as well, for marketing purposes. But certainly, goat meat at the moment is not worth a lot, but I would hope that it's certainly going to increase in price as the market sort of recovers.
Yeah, no, exactly. In terms of your production environment, so I guess rainfall, pasture base, the kind of how you go about providing nutrition for the sheep and the goats. What's the sort of pastures, rainfall, all that sort of base?
So we're 500, 550 sort of mils rainfall. So winter dominant, it's probably not quite winter dominant, but it's there's a winter growth period basically. So it's certainly a favourable sort of environment for goats. Not too cold. It certainly gets cold, but it's not cold all year, not horrendous like some parts of southern Victoria.
Yeah.
And so, I run the goats on the same pastures as the sheep, which is, lucerne. So lucerne's great for certainly an October kidding, as long as it rains, and then getting those kids, continuing to grow over the summer, autumn.
Yeah.
But other than that, clover sort of annual grass-based pastures, and then crop stubbles is what all my stock sort of graze on.
Yeah.
And when that's not sufficient, we tend to feed lupins. We have lupins. Okay, they're more expensive if you were going to buy them, or the opportunity cost of selling them, but they store very well in silos.
Yeah.
And we use them in our crop rotation. And so and also the nutritional value of them is better than something like oats or other cereals, which you may also choose to feed. The lupins has a very high protein content, so about 30% protein, whereas your cereal grains might be it varies, but 9, 10, maybe 12%. a similar energy concentration. So, they're really good for young stock and pregnant lactating stock, which have higher protein requirements.
Yeah.
In addition, lupins don't cause acidosis, or be very unlikely to cause acidosis, grain poisoning, which is always a risk with cereal grains. So, but that's my choice. Other people can do what's most cost effective for them. Yeah.
Lupins are magic, aren't they, really? Like, they're just such a perfect little ball of energy and protein. They're where those people that can get hold of them, most people would, I think.
Yeah. But in terms of feeding the goats, I don't tend to feed them. I just tend to run them. Well, the last couple of seasons we've had good rainfall, so they've had lucerne, and I haven't needed to feed, basically.
Yeah.
But, because feeding is expensive, and you want to minimise the quantity of supplementary feeding that you're going to be doing.
Yeah. Scanning and sort of reproductive rates, are they sort of, what sort of, have you done much on numbers, or you've sort of been increased?
Not scanning on goats. No, I don't have sufficient to warrant that,
yeah.
in my view. I had about 150% born last year, kids to does, that is.
Yeah.
And the weaning percentage was about 90%.
Yeah.
So certainly room for improvement. I had quite a bit of fox predation last year, which wasn't pleasant. There's a bit of a rogue fox. I mean, we baited foxes, but we didn't get this one. So there's a rogue fox sort of targeting not only the kids, but quite like month-old lambs.
Yeah, right.
Even a weaner lamb I lost. So this is unusual for foxes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we need to deal with that fox. So 90% kidding. Yeah, plenty of opportunity, I think, to do better. But I don't because of the numbers and the time. I don't pursue shed kidding, which some people do. Too labour intensive. I just don't have the time.
No.
So for commercial flocks, they need to be lambing outdoors, but with adequate shelter so that they can get into shelter.
Yeah.
So I shear in September. Key reason for that is to remove the wool around the teats prior to kidding, so that the kids can actually access the udder. Because my goats have probably too much coverage around the various regions, and I need to work on that through genetics. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess if we do wander into genetics, I guess if you were, or the things that you plan on selecting for, what are those sort of traits now that you're sort of a couple of years in? And
well, my aim, whether I can achieve it or not, but my aim is to focus on production characteristics. So your income is from mohair production, so fleece weight by micron. Yeah. So reduce micron, maintain or increase fleece weight of quality fibre.
Yeah.
That's my key. But also to work on, some of I don't want bigger goats necessarily. I want faster growth rates, better resilience, more fat.
Yeah.
Because one of the issues that, in my opinion, sheep are too big. They're difficult to handle, and I don't want my goats getting like that. So, production traits that make you money. Obviously, your fertility traits or kids weaned per doe is also important, but that's, again, like sheep, going to be, yes, it's heritable, but it's a low heritability and it's going to be slow to achieve, whereas, all your fibre traits are similar sort of heritabilities to merino wool. So certainly ample opportunity to increase production if you can find the right genetics to source. The other thing that I think is really important in terms of genetics is reducing the micron blowout with age.
Yeah.
There's a technical paper on the AgriFutures website, actually, which looked at a range of genetics, and certainly there is potential to do that. And actually noticed someone in Western Australia is actually working on this at the moment. But, so mohair price is, partially dictated by micron, and micron changes from, 25 as a kid up to, 35 or more as an adult. If we can reduce that, we can certainly reduce the reduction in price we get with aging flocks. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could keep, if they only ever got to young goat sort of fibre, then it'd make them a very lucrative production system. If you can get micron down into those older age groups, and definitely.
Yeah, but that's going to take time. I would imagine that there's not enough variation around to be able to easily select appropriate bucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that kid survival gap is obviously something that we can probably work on first and foremost with nutrition and shelter, and then have a genetic impact as well. But I guess between kid birth weights is probably why it makes them a bit attractive to foxes. They're a little bit, obviously small and easily predated, so that's something we need to work on. Mineral requirements is something that, I don't know, I feel like when people think nutrition in the goat world, they think minerals, whereas most of it's just energy and protein, like it isn't anything. Is there anything different you're doing mineral-wise for the sheep to the goats, or other than the B1 watching?
No, I don't. In general, I don't feed the mineral supplements to either sheep or goats.
Yeah.
So goats certainly do have higher mineral requirements than sheep, but whether you actually need to supplement will depend on what your location is and what they're eating, So some regions, as for sheep, are well known to be deficient in certain minerals.
Yeah.
Selenium, iodine, particularly in the tableland type, coastal sort of soils, rather than here. However, I do supplement, if I'm feeding grain, I do or should supplement, calcium to get the also ag lime, basically, to get the calcium phosphorus balance reasonable to avoid hypercalcemia. And certainly if I'm lambing on or kidding on a grazing cereal, so a pure grass type pasture, I would be supplementing with a magnesium and calcium. So magnesium to avoid grass tetanus, so magnesium deficiency, because I know those things will occur if I don't.
Yeah.
But there are specific situations. In general, I don't supplement because I don't have the need to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other people may.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, it's been a great chat. Is there anything else we should cover?
The only other aspect that people should be aware of is the management required to get good mohair prices. So certainly in sheep world, we have our micron length, strength, vegetable matter content are really important. In mohair, its price is certainly dictated by micron, although that's harder to change. What you can influence is staple length. Okay, so time of shearing. To get the desired staple length. So too short or too long is a bad thing. And mohair grows really fast, about a couple of centimetres a month. So get your time of shearing right to get within the guidelines for length is important. In fact, time of shearing is also important in terms of avoiding cotting and discount for cotted fleece. So there is some fibre shedding in Angora goats in winter, and so it's recommended that you actually shear, August, September to minimise those loose fibres running around and sort of causing cotting. So, but people have to do what suits their system. But if cotting is an issue, shearing in August, September as one of the shearings, 6 monthly shearings is what is recommended.
Yeah.
The other thing about mohair is that vegetable matter content is going to attract really high discounts. So do everything you can to keep vegetable matter out of the mohair. Things that stick in the wool, like horehound or trefoil burrs, they are far more serious than they would be in a wool enterprise. So choose the paddocks you're going to put them in, and take them out when grass seeds are going to be happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that lines up with your August, September shearing as well. Short, just as grass seeds start to be around and burr starts to be around. But yeah, no, it's definitely, having grown up running them in the mallee where we had a heap of burr medic, it was relatively heartbreaking to see your kids' value of the fibre reduced significantly. But that's a challenge, and I think, and cotting, same thing. Cotting more in the obviously the higher rainfall areas wasn't such a problem in the mallee, but it would be the more rain you get on, the colder it gets, it tends to be a problem.
Yeah. The only other thing regarding mohair was I haven't had problems at all with low staple strength or colour, things that are real, common issues in wool. But stain is something that certainly needs to be addressed. And so, they just, I don't know why. I think it's probably because of the longer staple length. They just get a lot more stain than sheep.
Yeah.
And that will attract a discount in the mohair. And so they do need crutching, ideally prior to shearing, so that, you don't contaminate, you've got less risk of contaminating your high value fibre. But certainly that's something that needs to be watched. But even though they do get stained, they are far less susceptible to fly strike, I've found.
Yeah.
Far less. So in that way, they are, actually easy to manage. I haven't needed to put any chemical on them at all to protect against fly strike, whereas, with the sheep we tend to.
Yeah, I think, in the decades that we had them, I don't think we might have had one struck once or something from a really extreme case of like coccidia or something where you get caked on crap basically. But and even when they do get struck, they don't seem to be able to stay there much. Like even ones that do get a little touch, it seems to fall out anyway. So
I don't know why that is. I think it might be the lower density of the mohair makes it dry out more. Yeah, not sure. But they certainly don't have the fly strike problem that sheep do.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, it's been awesome. Thanks, Susan. Thanks for your time, and look forward to following along and seeing that herd develop. And
so do I.
Yeah. and hope for the profitability that flows.
All right. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks again to Heinegger, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Thank you to MNSD Animal Health and Allflex Livestock Intelligence. They offer an extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. We thank both of these companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.